So I've recently joined TikTok, and I stumbled across a video of a police officer dancing to a choreographed routine with students at a school gym. Lo and behold, it was Ryan Tillman. I'm Crystal Bailey, host of Rise to the Call, and this story gives me so much hope. Ryan Tillman is doing big things by addressing societal issues through transparency in his organization, Breaking Barriers United. Check it out. So, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. You're in this process. It is Breaking Barriers, literally, Breaking Barriers United being the organization that you created. You are a police officer, you are an influencer, you're a content creator, you're a speaker. I'd love to hear your story. I know I've heard some parts of it about how you were not really interested in being in law enforcement. Tell me a little bit about that as a kid and how you landed where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of funny. What I'm doing now, everything you just mentioned is, what I always wanted to do from the very beginning, with the exception of being a police officer. So what ended up happening was my wife came into our bedroom one day early in the morning, and she was like, "I'm pregnant." And I was like, "What?" She was like, "I'm pregnant." And I think
you were more excited than that.
I was definitely very, very excited. My wife was excited, but she was a little bit more afraid. I just had this happy face, like, "Oh wow, really," because we weren't expecting it. And so when she told me she was pregnant, after the excitement kind of wore off, again the reality set in, like, "Hey, what are you going to do to provide for your baby?" So my dad's friend at the time for years had been trying to recruit me into law enforcement. And I was like, heck no, absolutely not. I'm not about to be working for the man. I'm not about to be like a pig. And then unfortunately, that was my mentality, just because I had some bad experiences with law enforcement growing up. So after 2 years of him trying to recruit me, putting on all the full court press on me, I started applying at agencies. And then I found myself getting hired with the Chino Police Department about 3 months later. What's interesting is, as I was doing all of this, I still didn't feel like I wanted to be a police officer. I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do still. I'm pulling people over. I don't like doing that. It feels like I'm always messing with people. I feel like people are always angry at me. I just didn't know if I liked it. And it wasn't until I got off of training that it all changed. That's when God gave me this vision, "Hey, I brought you into the profession because I have a bigger plan, a bigger call on your life. And I want you to go change the face of modern day policing. I want you to go bridge that gap between law enforcement and the community. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to go out there and show people the human behind the badge."
Talk to me a little bit about that. Did you think law enforcement was the enemy? Were you one of those people before you started where you were like, "Man, these people are not the good guys"? And tell me a little bit about those interactions that you had.
Yeah, so my initial perceptions of law enforcement were police officers were people that got picked on in high school, so they became police officers so they could pick on everybody else. That was my initial perception. So over time, I just started having these negative perceptions of law enforcement and the way I viewed them. And once I became a police officer, well, I don't want to say it all changed, but most of it changed when I became a police officer. And the reason I say I don't want to say it all changed is because, sadly, there are people in our profession that shouldn't have a badge and a gun. And I realized that early on. When I started to bridge this gap between law enforcement and the community, I also recognized the need to be able to call out those people that don't or shouldn't carry this honor that we have, so that way we can make the profession better.
Yeah, talk about that. What does it mean for you to change the face of policing? And I've gotten a chance to see some of your content. You have these podcasts, you have these speaking engagements, you have actual shows and series that you produce. Tell me a little bit about what the goal is and the impact that's been had on that.
So Sir Robert Peel is known as the father of modern day policing. Sir Robert Peel lived between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and Sir Robert Peel created a series of different pillars that basically he classified as what law enforcement was created to be and what law enforcement needs to be. Although he had some phenomenal philosophies, in my mind, I'm thinking, if he's a father of modern day policing, well, shoot, we need a facelift, because that was the late 1800s, early 1900s. We've all seen what's been going on in the profession of law enforcement over the last, several 30, 40 years. So we need a facelift. And so I could start showing people that law enforcement isn't what you think it is. then I think we can start to change what that perception is of law enforcement. So that's kind of been my goal. And the way I do that is, like you mentioned, like I create content all the time. I have a new series called Switch, which is where we switch the roles of law enforcement and community members. So that way they can understand the what, the why, and the how. You know, if my kids decide to be police officers, I want them to go into a profession that's honorable and reputable and that people want to do. If they decide not to go into law enforcement and they have an interaction with a police officer, I want to say that I was able to make an impact on the officer that's treating my son or daughter at the traffic stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have an opportunity as a young person of color to relate to people that maybe an older, traditional looking law enforcement officer might not have, and yet you're able to do that bridging, right? The bridging of the gap. And I'm curious, I saw that video, for example, of you with the kids at the school. I know that's like your viral video.
That is one of my viral videos, no doubt about it.
Did that one kind of take it from, here, this is what I want to do, to like the next level? Did you, did the viral aspect of it kind of take part?
It absolutely did. I had a viral video when I was a school resource officer it just went crazy viral, over 100 million views on all the different media platforms. And so I wanted to leave my students with something that they would never forget. And I already had a great relationship with my students. So I did a choreographed dance video that was just awesome because I've always loved to dance. I met my wife at a club, that's a story for a different day. But it was really kind of cool because all prior to that day, I had already been preaching a lot about bridging the gap and about how to do it and community engagement and getting involved and doing this. And so it was kind of just like showing the world, like, not only does he talk about it, but he's being about it. Like he's actually out there doing this work. And so it actually exposed a lot more of the world to who I was, what I was doing. And it wasn't like fake. It wasn't, inauthentic. I think it was very, very authentic and people recognized it, which led to the credibility of our organization.
Can you give me like a brief summary of what Breaking Barriers United is?
In every aspect of everything that we do as an organization, I wanted it all to tie back to bridging the gap somehow. So for example, the series of Switch that you can watch on YouTube, it's bridging that gap because it's providing education about the law enforcement profession. Our Chosen program, which, you can see if right now I have a shirt on that says Chosen. We have a Chosen Academy, which is an enrichment program where I hire police officers to go mentor kids in our schools. Well, they're bridging that gap between the law enforcement and the youth. So I really, when people look at that mission statement, I want people to say like, no, he's not just talking about it, but like in every aspect of his organization, you can see where he's doing that bridging.
So it's not just that you're like, there's this bridge between, I think, the police and the public, where like at FRN, we're really trying to do the same thing. We always say that we want this to be the bridge between first responders and their communities. Funny enough, same wording. And I think, it's interesting because there's a niche audience of you can only be talking to one group. Like you're either a law enforcement officer who only talks to the community, or you're a law enforcement officer who's only talking to other law enforcement officers. And so it's cool because I've seen you do both really well and navigate that space in a way that I don't think most people have been able to do successfully. And so, I've heard your story a few times now, so I won't pretend to not know things, but I'm curious what's something that you, that most people don't know about you, if you can think of anything off the top of your head that maybe hasn't been previously shared about what you do and why you do it.
You mentioned a few minutes ago or a few seconds ago that I have this ability to kind of connect to both sides, the law enforcement officers and the community. But that wasn't easy. I've taken a lot of criticism from members of the community, especially my own community. When I say my own community, I mean like the African-American community. I'm a police officer that is, explaining why officers are justified in what they do, even if it looks bad. I mean, there've been plenty of videos that we've all watched where it was a justified police shooting or a use of force and it looks bad. And I'm coming out on social media saying, hey, look, it was justified. You know how much stuff, like how much crap I've taken for that? I've been called, every derogatory name you can think of, Uncle Tom, a coon, all these different things. But then I've also taken heat from people in law enforcement. We brought up that dance video, and I had more criticism from people in law enforcement than I actually did from the community when I did it. I was getting quotes or getting comments like, oh, so that's what we're doing now? This is what we do now is we have to dance. And it's like, no, that's not what we're doing. I'm just connecting with my community. I've taken, crap from officers when I call other bad officers out. How could you say that about a fellow police officer? How are you Monday morning quarterbacking? And so all of those things that I've done were necessary to get to where we're going. Like they're all necessary in order to really bridge that gap between the community. You have to be transparent. And if we don't call out our bad officers or the ones that have made mistakes, then we can't have a transparent dialogue with the community. And from the community side is if you hate police officers that much, then what hope do you have when you have to dial 911 one day and police have to show up at your door? So as opposed to being a part of the problem, why don't we try to be a part of the solution?
Yeah, and I think I would also say that while there are people on either side, I would say the majority of people in this country are tired of the polarization and prefer a middle ground approach, but you're either a traitor because you are pro-cop or you're a traitor because, it's like one or the other. And I do think that the majority of us, if we were really honest with ourselves, really want there to be a little bit more unity across the board.
The media has kind of been hijacked in many ways to thinking that, you're either far left or you're far right, and there is no in between, which majority of people are either a little off left or they're either center off left or center off right. And, so, that's just the reality of things.
Yeah, it's like pick a side. I mean, this concept of identity, I feel that way. I mean, I'm biracial. So growing up, it was like, you got to pick a side. Are you Black or are you Latina? And it's like, I'm both. Like, let me be me. So,
funny you bring that up. Like Dak Prescott, a friend of mine, like I said, the Cowboys quarterback and the man of the year, by the way, he's biracial. And we were sitting down at dinner a couple of weeks ago, and literally he was having he said the exact same thing as you. He's like, my whole life, like I have a Black dad and a white mom. And it's like, people want you to pick a side. It's like, why? Like, I'm both.
Yeah, for sure. So you're both, literally, you're someone who's a member of the community and you're a law enforcement officer. And have you had any role models in what you've decided to do with your life to help get you where you're at?
Yes. The first person that came to mind was Gordon Graham. Gordon Graham has been you talk about a trailblazer. He was a trailblazer for our profession. I shot him an email, and Gordon emailed me almost immediately back and said, hey, let's get together, and I'd love to hear about what you have. And so not only was I like, fanboying all right away, I'm like, oh, wow, Gordon wants to meet with me, but he invited me to his house. That was over 7 or 8 years ago. And he has literally, him and his wife, Mrs. Graham, have just been phenomenal for me. They have probably been one of the biggest role models that I've ever had in this profession. And I really do want to, like I said, I thank you, Gordon, for doing everything you've done, but also leading by example, because it's people like you that motivate me to continue on to the next level.
It's such a pleasure to see somebody out here doing, really great work and actually changing the face of policing and being this new fresh face and an area where I think, if you look at the history of policing from way, way, way back, this to me is like where we should be. So I really
thank you so much, Crystal. And thank you so much for reaching out to me. It's been an honor. And I appreciate what you guys are doing over there with your guys' network and Axon. I mean, Axon is, really killing the game in many, many different ways. I mean, it's really cornered the market in so many different ways. I know a lot of the people over there. And so kudos to you guys for sharing these stories and wanting to share these stories, because I definitely think it's a necessity for our communities.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. Breaking barriers is something we're striving to do here at FRN as well, by telling authentic stories about first responders like Ryan Tillman. If you're interested in learning more about what he's working on, visit his website, breakingbarriersunited.com. Thanks for watching Rise to the Call.